creepy and cool TikToks that will blow your mind. Are you ready? Are you ready? Let's go!
Disclaimer: this video is for entertainment purposes only. Please do your own research, as these clips haven't been fact-checked.
Has a two-family household, spiritual beings that were created that are part of his divine counsel, and he has human children who were made in his image and likeness. On Mount Eden, this is the place where God always intended for his family to hang out. The clearest evidence of the sons of God and what we can know these beings to be. So you have a passage like Genesis 6 and Job 1, and in Job 2, you have the Hebrew phrase Benaha Elohim in reference to a divine counsel, which is where the Hasatan, this accuser figure, shows up in order to mess with Job. God speaks in Job 38. There's this verse that says, "Where were you when the morning stars and the Beneha Elohim and the sons of God shouted for joy at the beginning of creation?" And then you have Psalm 82, another divine counsel scene, which traces us all the way back to Eden, to Genesis 1. And so when you have this understanding of the sons of God, that actually helps us set the scene for the cosmic conflict that's taking place throughout the entire Hebrew Bible. And so the servant comes in. Why does Eve not freak the heck out? The issue actually isn't what the thing looks like. The issue is, what does the thing say? In our world today, man, we've got lots of things that look good. What is it actually saying about ourselves and about who God is?
Why are these new ticks like indestructible? And also with the rise of alpha-gal in the United States, like becoming so prominent that people are scared to go into the woods. What's going on with the chicken nowadays? Yeah, what you see behind me is all ticks. But before we go over indestructible ticks and the chicken, I want to show you something. My buddy Connecting Conscious just made a video about this. Just listen to what he has to say real quick.
The crazy part is, if it's anything like rats, there's not known to be many rats in the interior of Canada up here or in the States here because of the mountains. They can't really get over the mountains apparently. But these ticks, I guess if they happen to fall out of a plane, they could get anywhere, couldn't they? Now, I'm of course not suggesting that anyone's finding any boxes of anything on their farms and stuff, although I have seen a bunch of videos about it. But who do you blame on that when there's no name on the box, no trademark, no property of mention on the box? It's just a blank box that a million ticks crawl out of.
And now it gets really weird because these new ticks, they don't drown. And for some reason, I feel like if you took a match to one, they would still stay alive as well. So bajillions of ticks everywhere, especially where they're not usually even seen. Ticks that survive underwater like fish. All of a sudden, so much of humanity in the United States is getting alpha-gal, and now the chickens are evolving to where you cannot even eat them. Yo, this is life in 2026. What even is going on? Look at this.
Imagine what the ticks do to the animals we eat. If they make humans allergic, then what can it do to the animals?
So there's basically, in all of Roman history, there's like 5 good emperors, and they happen in a row. And they happen in a row because each one does not have a male heir. So they don't have sons. So in the Roman tradition, it was much more common to, if you didn't have a son, you would adopt a son. And so the Emperor Hadrian is old, probably gay, does not have any children, and he adopts, he sees something in Marcus that Marcus is young, but he sort of starts mentoring this boy. They actually go like hunting together. Like he sees something special in this kid. Marcus's nickname was Verismus, or the truthful one. But he's like just a kid. And Hadrian realizes he's too young to name him emperor. So he selects a man named Antoninus Pius, who's the like great politician of the time, and makes him emperor on condition that he adopt Marcus Aurelius. So Marcus, and then the thinking was Antoninus Pius would live for like 5 years and then Marcus would be king. And in fact, he lives for like 19 years. So Marcus has like a 20-year apprenticeship in being the emperor under a man who like could have killed him, who could have been corrupted by power.
Oh, that's why he's a good emperor, huh? Smart.
But
no, this isn't some big old European town. In fact, it's a very small city in America. In the late 1890s and early 1900s. I mean, just look at the population at that time. Barely 40,000 people. Most of it was wiped out during the hurricane of the 1900s. That's why I chose these images before then. All of this was built for a town under 40,000 people. This was a school. This was another school. Two massive schools, and that's not even counting this Ursuline Academy here. This academy was just a Catholic school for girls. So we have three massive and beautiful schools before the 1900s. And all of this for, again, a city under 40,000. Does any of this narrative make sense to you? And of course, most of it was conveniently lost during the hurricane.
Wow.
I guess Great Fires were kind of getting a little old. Had to switch it up a little bit. I'm telling you, America is a lot older than we've been told. The founding of this country,
Ooh, look at that.
greatly exaggerated, as is most of the history. That is nothing more than a set of lies agreed upon that we've been told. Question everything, friends. Until next time.
Wow, that multi-deck mansion is exquisitely beautiful.
The Anglo-Saxons didn't just sit back and take the Norman conquest, they rebelled a lot. The rebellions were often launched by the true heirs to the throne, starting off with Harold Godwinson's sons. Harold Godwinson, King of England, Arrow takes him out at the Battle of Hastings, but his children, of which he had many sons, flee to Ireland and then basically raise the banner of rebellion for a few years, and they actually start ravaging the English coast of about 52 ships, which they procure in Ireland, and they end up getting defeated actually by a Saxon warrior himself who has sworn allegiance to William the Conqueror. They then get defeated again in 1069. They flee to Flanders and then they flee to Denmark, where they ask the Danish king Svein II, will you come and help us? He says no, because he's just already helped somebody. We'll come to that in a second. And unfortunately for all the sons of Harold Godwinson, they just kind of disappear after, once they reach Denmark, they're lost to the historical record, except one son called Ulf, who actually gets captured by the Normans after the Battle of Hastings, grows up in Normandy at the court of William the Conqueror, and is actually knighted by William the Conqueror's son, and after this he kind of fades into obscurity. You can imagine just chilling at some fancy castle, probably. But the truest heir to the throne is a chap called Edgar Atheling. He's the great-nephew of Edward the Confessor, the last king of the House of Wessex. And he was too young to be crowned when Edward the Confessor passed away in January 1066. But after the Battle of Hastings, the lords in London declare him as king. They don't crown him, but they do declare him. However, with William the Conqueror, entering London, they all just kind of surrender, and Edgar Atheling hands himself over to William the Conqueror. But he would spend his 70-year-long life basically flip-flopping between being friends of the Normans and being a bitter enemy. And eventually he leaves London, leaves the Norman court, heads up to Scotland, marries the daughter of the King of Scotland, and then in 1069 raises a massive rebellion in the north of England. And as a bunch of lords back him, and has the King of Denmark land as well on the English shore and back him up, and they eventually capture York. William the Conqueror, when he hears about this, is outraged, right? He is absolutely furious. Takes his army north and buys off the Danes. They then head home, and what's left of the Anglo-Saxons basically just sort of peter away and vanish. Edgar Atheling flees back into Scotland. But the harrying of the north follows, which is basically William the Conqueror laying waste to the north of England, burning crops, villages, livestock. It's really brutal. Edgar Atheling, spends a bit of time in Italy as a mercenary, goes on the First Crusade, and eventually passes away on a small holding in England given to him by the sons of William the Conqueror. But the Anglo-Saxons, they fought, and they fought bravely. They unfortunately did not fight successfully. And I hope you enjoyed.
Man, his telling of England history is extremely captivating. Great post, mate.
This somewhat lesser-known Irish Gothic novel is a classic piece of literature written by a clergyman and released in 1820. While it created scandal and ruined the career of the author, the legacy and the impact of the book can still be felt today. It's the story of a man named Melmoth, who trades his very soul for 150 extra years of life. This Faustian pact with the great beast himself results in a conflict in which Melmoth spends his remaining years wandering the earth, trying to find some poor unfortunate upon whom he can bestow this terrible curse. This is where the novel uses the Russian doll approach or folded narrative to tell stories within stories. Avid readers of the genre will notice shades of Matthew Lewis, Anne Radcliffe, and most notably Denis Diderot, whose story The Nun is greatly adapted within these works. Despite its wide range of influences, the novel remains a unique experience. Maturin has a skill as a storyteller which is standalone and manages to emphasize elements of the grotesque to great effect. But it is worth noting, as with most of these stories, that the devil always gets his due.
I got a comment of someone asking me to analyze Faust's final form in Land of the Lustrous, and I wanted to approach it using the lens of sacred geometry. Sacred geometry is the observance and study of designs and patterns that are universal, seen in places like the cosmos, DNA, everyday life, religious scripture, and oftentimes these shapes and patterns hold spiritual and religious significance. One of my favorite mangas actually includes sacred geometry in the Golden Ratio, which we see in Steel Ball Run. It plays such an important role which is needed for our characters to access the golden rotation. Faust's final god design is very sleek and minimalist, except for the part that is the most notable, which is his head. And his head actually falls under the sacred geometric sign of Vesica Piscis, which is the intersection of two circles who have the exact same circumference. Also, within the middle where we see the overlap is the area called the mandorla, which is actually the Italian word for almond. Because the two circles, or sometimes more, have the exact same radius and the center of each other actually lie on each other's circumference, these circles can represent a lot of different things. For example, the unification of the divine and the human physical world, also being known as the womb of the universe. We actually see this everywhere when it comes, especially Christian archaeology and art. Faust reaching the point where he can even have the expression of Vesica Piscis in his design was arguably the thing planned by Akamea. He wanted Faust to be someone that was an amalgamation of all parts of humanity, with the stone, with the Lunarians, with the gem, all of it, like the Admiralis, but also reach a point where Faust transcends humanity, as we are seeing now with the sacred geometry. And in the center of it all, the Mandorla, oftentimes we see divine-like figures sit in this part. They are the ones who are able to express judgment in the same way Faust is able to express judgment on those who want to move on to another universe. You can call this a huge happy accident, a major coincidence, or just me overreading it, but those who follow sacred geometry say that our inclination for certain shapes and designs are never just accidents.
And this is infused with radium. And this is a radium water bottle. And if you look at this, because I'm sure you're starting to imagine what that kind of looks like. It looks like a nuclear power plant.
Doesn't it, though?
That's exactly what they use to have the nuclear power plant. They use radium and uranium, and it's a steam plant. And the steam plant is what produces
that's radioactive
energy. And that is why they went after the nuclear power plants. And Galen Winsor said this because nuclear power plants are only operating at 20% capacity right now, because they don't want to have to make people realize that they could have just used this technology the whole time. They have to sell them solar panels. They need to sell them windmills. And Galen Winsor also talked about if people were making their own little cold fusion nuclear power plants in their backyard, they wouldn't need the energy from the Rockefellers. So that's the start of this. So we'll get into talking about this. So this is the radium water bottle. And what the government did was in 1934, when the FDA came along, the first thing they went after, because that's the FDA was created in 1934, the first thing they went after was radium water.
It's fun looking back at all the different sci-fi movies and stories and seeing what they got right and got wrong. Here's a graph of the timeline. This is where we're at right now. First, let's start with 2001: A Space Odyssey. This story was written in 1968, but it was about the future in the year 2001. In this story, they predicted that the year 2001 would have different things like tablet computers, flat screen monitors, and global satellite communication, which is really crazy because the author of this story actually correctly described geostationary communication satellites even before they were launched. The book even had astronauts reading news on devices that kind of resembled iPads, and it's just crazy and extremely accurate that they were reading digital media on tablets. Here's another one that happened not too long ago. This is Back to the Future 2. This came out in 1989. In this story, you know, Marty McFly goes to the year 2015, where they predicted the use of different things like virtual reality headsets, and kids always using them, and smart home appliances. Also things like automated ordering at restaurants, and Zoom and FaceTime calling. What I find really crazy, this one really blows my mind, is that they predicted that the Chicago Cubs, the baseball team, would win the World Series in the year 2015.
No way.
This is so crazy because the Cubs had not won a World Series for 108 years. And they actually, in real life, they ended up winning the World Series in 2016. So they were just 1 year off. They also predicted things like hoverboards, which we kind of got. It seemed like it was kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, but the ones they had in the movie were way cooler. But we did not get the flying cars that they had, sadly. Another interesting one is RoboCop. So this one predicted that there would be the collapse of Detroit, the city of Detroit, by the year 2015. This story was written in 1987. And what's really nuts is Detroit actually did collapse. And they were actually pretty accurate on the prediction because it collapsed in the year 2013. And this was the largest municipal bankruptcy in U.S. history, where they had $18 billion in debt. So they were just 2 years away from getting that right. Now for Blade Runner, this was the older one in the year 2019. We don't have the organic humans that do our dirty work, but we do have like labs that grow tissues and also like different companies trying to de-extinct animals, which is pretty sick. But also in Blade Runner, there is the Tyrell Corporation that is, you know, like running all the different things in society basically. And also today, I feel like there are a handful of corporations that control a bit too much of specific infrastructure like communication. So I feel like that prediction was fairly decent for 1982. Soylent Green was a movie about the future in the year 20.
And I'm so excited for 2030 when we meet Godzilla.
Bro, have you ever seen...
Yo, that is crazy.
That's
What is that? They say alpha-gal syndrome is real. Lone Star tick bites can cause a serious meat allergy, but it's spreading naturally as the ticks move north. There's zero evidence that it is a deliberate World Economic Forum, Bill Gates tick bomb plot. That's conspiracy nonsense. Okay, fine. It's conspiracy nonsense. We're just crazy people over here. The only question that I have in response is, if it is just nonsense, why do they keep shoving it in our face, this conspiracy?
There's this thing called the Lone Star tick, where if it bites you, you'll become allergic to meat. Sort of describe the mechanism. So that's something that we can do through human engineering.
Okay, you guys all heard that, right? We can address real world problems with human engineering. Beneficial blood sucking. Yes, that is the actual title of the paper, and it's written by researchers at Western Michigan University. Say, quote, alpha-gal syndrome, AGS, is caused by being bitten by a Lone Star tick. The sole primary effect of AGS is mammalian meat allergy, and there are no significant side effects of developing AGS. There's no significant side effects at all, other than your entire diet being completely screwed up, but otherwise, all good. Herein, we have argued that AGS is a moral bioenhancer and that its promotion is morally obligatory. Among other things, that means that researchers have an obligation to develop the AGS carrying capacity of ticks, and that means human agents are obligated to expose others to AGS and possibly Lone Star ticks, not to prevent the spread of AGS or Lone Star ticks, and to undermine attempts to cure AGS. Basically, these guys are just saying the quiet part out loud here. They are advocating for the modification of the Lone Star tick to make us allergic to red meat and publishing peer-reviewed papers in academic journals arguing that it would actually be unethical not to infect people with a red meat allergy. But you'd be a crazy person to think that Bill Gates or whatever projects that he's funding could be dropping tick bombs.
I have two words. Biological warfare.
What we all got here.
and what we are being. Are we the most advanced civilization to ever be here? You tell me. During the early stages of discovery, most of the sculptures at the Center for Restoration and Conservation are missing their heads. And the cause lies in the fact that the site was unattended, with the group looting and focusing on the best parts of the sculptures from the old world. Can we all see very clearly now that the heads of the past, the depictions of the old world, give away way too much information to all of us, failing to fence off the site, and of course, finding human skeletons at the site, placed in a sitting and crouching position, belonging to female and male individuals between 13 and 15 years of age. A necropolis. Are you ready to go further? Where we have seen episode 97 and episode 98, Palmyra, Syria, and the Temple of Baal, where we know that Sardinia appears to be connected to Syria, Sardinia. We are not done with you. The Great Tomb of Osiris, Egypt, a location that in 2022 just found a tunnel beneath the temple at a depth of 20 meters. Or 65 feet underground. The tunnel is 2 meters high, or 6.5 feet, and 1,305 meters long, 4,281 feet. Supposedly constructing this to transport water to the old world, where another article tells us that a secret tunnel was discovered, a geometric miracle, telling us that the purpose of the tunnel is still unclear. Take a look at this tunnel. This is all for water transportation? You tell me. The previous civilization that was extremely advanced and had technology.
Michael Jackson
Follow this guy on YouTube, Lunch Break. Really good.
was trying to say what it was. Kanye West was trying to say what it was.
It was a Jewish doctor.
Michael Jackson had a list of the 6 Jewish people who he said were messing with his life. Rabbi Shmuley was on the list. They called him an anti-Semite because he was talking about control in Hollywood and people that he was fighting.
Who's Rabbi Shmuley?
He called himself Michael Jackson's rabbi. It's just a person that is constantly threatening people out in the open and is somehow allowed to do it because of what his father did for the state of Israel. And often you will find that thread of the people who are the most deranged and the most psychopathic and yet somehow seem to be allowed to function in society. You just have to figure out who their parents were, who their uncles were, and they've done something for the state of Israel. So they're like in the Zionist mafia, as I describe it.
I have great news. This is transforming this into breathable oxygen. Yeah. It can be hooked up to a diesel generator, a car, a industrial power generator, a jet engine. It doesn't matter. And the coolest part is it's based off an ancient Hindu weapon. So what you're seeing up here are little plasma balls that spin so fast they expand and then collapse. It's like sonoluminescence, but in the air. It may sound complex, but it's the same process that thunderstorms make lightning with. That energy is then used to reconfigure atoms into new elements. About 120 years ago, this would have made total sense. We used to look at the periodic table in terms of frequency, and if you fold the ends together, you'd get a torus. An element's resonant geometry is basically what quantum physics is showing us. This one's overcharged, so you can see the sparks. Those plasma balls are usually inside that sphere, and they reconfigure the geometry of the atom. In every test so far, the air pollutants have been reduced to almost nothing, while oxygen has been increased sometimes close to 7,000%. That means breathable air would come out of your exhaust pipe. The part that actually does this is called the Vajra. It's an ancient Hindu object mentioned first in the Rig Veda. The closed Vajra is said to be used for transformation, which is exactly what's happening in the thunderstorm generator. The open version was depicted as a weapon of electrical discharge in almost every culture. Conceptually, similar to a Tesla coil. But the same inventor built a turbine with it. Now when you look at the scientific papers, you'll see the resemblance to the Vajra. But it also appears it's been encoded in ancient architecture as well. If you follow me, temple tech is one of my main topics. That's the science behind the theory, and it's very popular because it's very easy to understand. I put it in every book because this will be the tech of the future. Now, all these ancient similarities can be viewed as a protocol. It was just a way to communicate this process. So if you've been sleeping this week, we've had dancing robots at the T-Pain show where he played dubstep. Alchemy's back. It's a good week, dude.
China just finished building a wall of trees around an entire desert, and it just took them 46 years to finish it. So China basically just looked at one of the driest deserts on the entire planet, and it's a place that is so brutal that locals literally call it the place of no return. It stretches over 3,000 kilometers around the entire desert, and they've already planted over 66 billion trees. They just officially turned a place where almost nothing could survive into a place that is actively cleaning the air. And this isn't even done, by the way, because the full project is supposed to run until 2050, and it will eventually be the largest ecological engineering project in human history. Meanwhile, my houseplant didn't make it because I forgot to water it for 3 days.
Meanwhile, a lot of countries planting data center.
Isn't it crazy to think about the extremely significant places from history that were just covered up by dirt, and they just decided, no, it's not really worth keeping up with. The Roman Forum, the capital of Rome, what people would argue is the capital of the world, not worth keeping up with. We'll just let it get buried by time and dirt. This area was so buried by dirt that later on they built Christian churches there that were floating off the ground. The doors were floating off the ground, and since they have excavated it, there's now doors floating like 15 feet off the ground because there was that much dirt covering these structures from then. Or like the Sphinx. No, the Sphinx is lame. What is it? One of the oldest things maybe ever. No, we just let that get covered up by dirt. We don't even really know. We don't know what's underneath it. We don't know what the feet look like, and they had to re-excavate it again. And then things like Chichen Itza. It was like the largest Mayan city of all time. Maybe one of the largest cities in the Western Hemisphere that we know of. I mean, we're talking like 35 to 50,000 people were in this city. They just let that get covered up by the jungle and taken over, and no, it wasn't really worth keeping up with. It was just, you know, one of the largest pyramids in the entire world. How did this happen? How did people go from having the most significant places in the world to them just being covered up and forgotten about? It's so crazy to think about this. Do you guys realize that we didn't like rediscover Pompeii until extremely recently? I think it was like sometime in the 90s they figured out that Pompeii was beneath the ground. They're thinking that they barely even scratched the surface of what they are excavating from this town. They're thinking that less than half has been discovered of Pompeii. So all these places are so crazy. Why is the Sphinx so old? We really don't know. I'm starting to think that like there are parts of history that were really not being fully taught for some reason. And you know what? In a society that now today is outsourcing our main competitive advantage, which is critical thinking, to machines, it kind of makes sense that, you know, humanity would repeat this. And that's not what I mean. I don't mean repeat this as in like there was some sort of advanced thing that took over before, but I'm just saying that like we are doing that. Like humanity's competitive advantage is thinking. We are replacing ourselves with machines. We're not thinking anymore. What are we doing? It's just strange to me. But what do you guys think? Maybe I'm overthinking.
Nobody ever built something so amazing and then abandon it.
Did you see this post from Miss Creepy TV? She pointed out how there's pretty much a face in the side of the mountain. I think I have an explanation for that. So this is Mount Kailash.
Ooh.
And this face is on the side of this mountain somewhere. And this mountain happens to be sacred to multiple cultures. She mentioned in her video how it is believed to be the center of the world. And I could see how these cultures believe that, because there's definitely something going on there. Have you ever heard about...
Ooh, I see two clear faces off to the left, one above the other. Never heard of this place before.
The other mysteries surrounding this mountain? Allegedly, back in 1999, there was a Russian expedition to this mountain. And the climbers of that expedition happened to experience rapid aging. These climbers climbed beyond a certain point and aged decades in mere days. Those same climbers died a year later of old age. Now, all that's completely unverifiable, so what's going on with this, and what's the explanation? Well, the explanation is terraforming. We've discussed how a lot of these geologic layers happen to be terraformed because we found evidence of it. We found a architectural blueprint in these layers that seem to be all over the world. And this mountain is one of those structures. But what's more interesting is this ancient culture that terraformed all this stuff. Well, it had to have power plants. It had to have structures that operated. What if this is one of those structures? What if this is some kind of power plant that when those men interacted, It aged him rapidly. And this face, all it is the art style from that ancient culture. Most people believe that's a mud fossil, but it's not. It's art.
All versions of the Sleeping Beauty story we know come from medieval literature. They are horrible and all involve assault. But they're really important to recognize and look at. This is the main one, often referred to as Troilus and Zelindine. It's from a bigger story called Persephorce, which is an Arthurian romance, which means it's basically vaguely about King Arthur, and it was written in the 13th or 14th century in French. Zelindine is a princess from Zeeland, which is basically the Netherlands, and Troilus is a knight from Scotland. They know each other and love each other before the story starts, which happens in almost no Sleeping Beauty stories later. One day, Troilus hears that Zelindine has fallen under an enchanted sleep, and so he rushes to Zeeland to rescue her, but first goes to the temple of 3 goddesses, Roman goddesses. Venus, goddess of love, Lucina, the goddess of childbirth, and Themis, the goddess of destiny. This is what he is told by those ladies: when you pluck from the slit the fruit that holds the cure, the girl will be healed. The Greek wind god Zephyr transforms into a bird, takes him up to this high tower, tries to wake her up and shakes her. He rails against Venus for not being more specific, and so she shows up and says, you're all alone with this beautiful girl, the one you love above all others, and you don't lie with her. What's interesting about this version that you don't see in later fairy tales is he does not want to do it. He knows it is wrong, and he fights Venus for a long time until she finally inflamed him so that he couldn't stop himself, and he does it. Afterwards, he trades back rings that they traded long ago, and then the wind god takes him away. 9 months later, Zelindine gives birth to a baby boy who searches for her nipple and sucks on her finger and pulls out this magic thorn that has been causing her sleepiness in the first place. And she wakes up. Turns out she got cursed because she gave a feast for Venus, Lucina, and Themis, but gave Themis like either a worse plate or not a knife. So Themis got mad and cursed her to fall eternally asleep when spinning one day and getting this thorn under her fingernail. She's supposed to sleep forever, but Venus felt so bad for her that she changed the curse so that she could be awakened by a baby that she got pregnant with while asleep. That was Venus's
while asleep
doing. The whole giving birth without knowing it and having the thorn sucked from the finger happens in lots of early Sleeping Beauty stories, particularly in the most famous one, Sun, Moon, and Talia from Italy. In a lot of these stories, we don't get told how the women feel about this, but in this one, we're told Zelindine is desolate and upset and feels violated. 'Cause she was. Her dad, the king, is so happy she's woken up, however, that he throws a huge feast for her. She's still mad though, because she thinks it's the god Mars who impregnated her, because like a servant saw the bird flying away and assumed it was him in bird form. Only later does the ring help her realize it was actually the man she loves, Troilus. Of course, she eventually finds him, they get married, the baby grows up to be a great knight. He's apparently going to end up being the ancestor of Lancelot. But it is interesting this earlier version is both more horrible than the sanitized Disney one, and yet more humanizing at the same time.
To push a skull into a shape like this is not a small thing. It takes years. It starts in infancy and involves pressure and binding, and most importantly, pain. When you see dozens of skulls like this in one place, you are looking at something that is culture-wide. It's an intentional decision. It seems clear that this was not done to everyone. It's clusters. It's around elites and priests and shamans. And the message is simple. In this world, the skull is not a skull. It's a badge of honor. It's proof that you belong to something higher. Those who have an elongated skull are
looks like Homer Simpson.
Members of a special class. Their heads are like a secret password carved directly into their bone.
They all have the same story.
Yeah.
That's what's really crazy. Every ancient culture has a story of a flood.
Mahabharata had the same thing where there was a big, almost like a tsunami-like thing. I don't exactly know what it was called.
Here it is. The primordial Manu flood. Classic Hindu great flood myth where the righteous king Manu is warned by a divine fish about an imminent deluge that will destroy humanity. He builds a boat, loads it with his family. It's like Noah and the Ark. With seeds and animals, ties it to the horn of the god in fish form, which tows the boat to safety until the waters recede and the world is repopulated.
Everyone wants to say that giants don't exist, right? So let me ask you, what the heck are those giant doors for? Who built those giant doors and why did they build them? And why in the world are the hands or the handles so freaking high up? Who would be using that? If the Nephilim didn't help build the pyramids, who was able to carry 1 to 2 ton cinder blocks and put them so precisely that if it was even a millimeter off, everything would come crumbling down? why in the world are there Nephilim all over the Egyptian hieroglyphics? Like, you know, that those videos that say the innate human need to be remembered? What if our existence isn't the only thing they wanted us to remember? And I keep trying to tell you guys, like, we are desensitized for a reason when it comes to these mythical creatures. It's only these past generations that it became so freaking crazy that this stuff existed. This was common knowledge before. Who built the giant doors? Who? Answer me in the comments. As always, make sure you like and follow. Comment down below if you want a deeper dive of this. And honestly, if you'd like, you can go on my YouTube. I have a podcast called The Deepest Rabbit Hole where I talk about all this crazy stuff, like all the things that I can't say on TikTok. You're going to love it there. My YouTube is Kayla Lorraine, and I'll see y'all over there.
The greatest cover-up in human history is the cover-up of human history. I forgot who said that.
350 years ago, Spanish explorers built this fortress almost entirely made out of seashells, and it is the reason that it is still standing here today. Florida was discovered by Spanish explorer Juan Ponce de Leon in 1513, just 21 years after Columbus discovered the Americas. But of course, during this time, the Spanish weren't the only ones attempting to forge new lands in the Americas. The French in particular had lodged themselves in the northern territories of the Spanish-Florida borders, and in 1565, the King of Spain sent Don Pedro Menendez de Aviles to come and secure the Spanish borders and drive the French back into the Caroline territories, what is today the Carolinas. And upon his arrival, he quickly began building wooden fortifications and founded this city of St. Augustine to prepare for battle. But they would struggle for over a century to maintain battle-ready fortifications, as the wooden fortresses would constantly be destroyed due to rot from the climate, storms and hurricanes, also due to the climate, and constant raids and attacks from the French. Finally, in 1668, St. Augustine was pillaged and raided by an English privateer named Robert Searle. He looted the town, killed a large number of the inhabitants, and burned down all of the wooden fortifications that had been keeping the city alive. The Spanish monarchy then decided that it was officially time to fund a building project for a permanent settlement in the city of St. Augustine to maintain their foothold in the American South. Now, by the 17th century, cannons and heavy artillery had become the standard in naval warfare, and fortresses were now being built out of brick and mortar and earthen materials because they protected against cannon fire better than traditional fortresses. Now, on the coast of Central Florida, the most abundant stone-like material is coquina, which are these naturally formed shell deposits that are packed tightly together over years of erosion, and they create an incredibly strong stone-like material that can be found all over Florida, which is why you see retaining walls, roads, and fortresses like this built out of it. It's incredibly fascinating. It's literally everywhere. And this is the best part. Not only did the coquina work as far as a building material, but it was actually superior at absorbing cannon fire better than any other natural material, which is why they would literally bounce off of the walls or even be absorbed into the walls entirely. Which is why the Castillo de San Marcos was able to withstand English cannon fire, storms, and hurricanes for over 350 years and is still standing today.
If you don't know, now you know.
They didn't break the Large Hadron Collider, they stabilized it. And what CERN just achieved means that humanity has exactly 4 years to evolve, or we will be completely, somewhat obsolete. Let me show you the map. Right now, CERN is pushing 7 tera-electron volts per beam. To make this simple, a TeV, or tera-electron-volt, is the energy of a flying mosquito, but it's compressed into a space 1 trillion times smaller than a grain of sand. Right now, they're actually intentionally climbing toward a 14 TeV design. In the 14th framework, the exact atomic number of silicon is bridging us out of the carbon-6 structure. In 2016, physics prodigy Max Laughlin pointed out that when CERN discovered the God particle, the energy density was so massive it likely collapsed our original timeline. We shifted into an adjacent parallel dimension, and that's the true origin of the Mandela effect. Basically, it's the quantum artifact of timelines bleeding together. Project Looking Glass already proved this when military intelligence hit a wall in the year 2012, and this is when timelines started to converge. So what's happening right now at this pause? CERN just confirmed back in March that they stabilized a beam. The chaos in the collider is over and the macro and micro are finally merging. We are now compacting information and energy into a single proton, and we are accelerating the switching signal faster than the speed of light. This creates zero latency across time, energy, and space. When you have zero latency, you process infinite output without extracting physical resources. We are gaining the ability to move in and out of alternative dimensions based purely on our own resonance. What happens is we will create and destroy them instantaneously without harming light. Now, this comes with a terrifying responsibility. When your processing speed hits zero latency, your thoughts manifest into reality immediately. If you hold on to fear, you will literally create your own demise just as fast. So CERN's giving us a 4-year window before they bring this back online and things really start to change. And through this, we are becoming the creator of the tools we observe. We must surrender the old human blueprint and step into our true design, which is ye are gods. You have 4 years to figure it out. Let's get to work. Thank you, and I love you.
Well, dang, where are we going back to the old timeline? I like that one better.
The Agoris on their perceived path to
Oh, man,
enlightenment,
look at this.
they reverse everything, and instead of keeping purity, keeping chastity, no, they engage in drinking urine, feces,
goodness.
even eating flesh of deceased people. Yes, you
Deceased people?
see some Agori next to the Ganges River, and there some Hindus bring down their deceased, and the Agori will actually eat human flesh, so they're cannibalistic
Ew.
of sorts as well.
Man, they are not enlightened. They are possessed by negative entities. By the way, this kind of Hinduism only happened in India. The majority people here in Bali are Hindu, but they don't do this shit. You know, as a matter of fact, Balinese people are super clean. You can't even go to their temple dirty. You need to wash up first, and in some temples they will give you a garment to cover up if you shows too much skin.
Animals not even AI could come up with. This is what happens when you try to force a sequel without paying respect to the source material. Nature very clearly tried to recreate the success of the giraffe, but on a budget. If tall ones are giraffes, then this is a rough giraffe. We don't talk about Garanux enough, and we
Man,
really
look
should.
at
They're
this.
100% responsible for a cryptid myth or 6. And you know they're not AI, because Garanux can go their entire lives without drinking water. Allen Iverson could never. There's nothing artificially intelligent about a bird
my
that loses all aura in water. Owls are just one of those animals you were never meant to see wet. That being said, I almost wish this were AI, because it'd be easier to accept. Northern white owls can change their appearance at will like a shapeshifter. They do this for intimidation and self-defense, and fair, this makes me feel very defensive. I'm just glad the first time I saw this I was
I think awe is cute.
sober. Owls are avian aliens that discovered free will. I feel like I forget and then rediscover this animal at least twice a year. I can't imagine living in a world where a stilt fox wearing black knee-highs is just another Tuesday, and honestly, I kind of want to. I dare you to guess the Maine wolf's closest relative. It's not a fox, it's not a coyote, and stupid you if you think it's a wolf. Nature really just be doing whatever. It's an uncanny canine identity crisis, and it sounds like one too. Do they roar? Do they bark? Now, the Maine wolf somehow does both. I love them, I really do, but seeing them go full speed does not make me feel good. Also, their pee smells like Snoop Dogg salad, and they've gotten zoos rated for it. Okay, 2 things. 1, that's a baby elephant, and 2, that's still a massive eland. Unless you're South African, it's probably the biggest animal you've never heard of. It's an antelope on steroids that can top 2,000 pounds. I've known about them since I was 8, but if you told me
Look
they
at that.
came out last year, I'd believe you. What an unserious animal.
Did you know that Bosnia might be hiding the world's oldest pyramid and nobody's talking about it? And no, I'm not talking about some tiny mound that kind of looks pyramid shaped if you squint hard enough. I'm talking about a massive forest covered hill that its researchers believe isn't a hill at all. So here's the story. Back in 2005, Bosnian American researcher Samir Osmanagic was visiting Visoko, Bosnia, and looked at this giant hill that towered over the town and noticed that it looked a lot more like a pyramid than something natural. So he started digging into it. He named it the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun, and the claim wasn't just that this site could be a pyramid, but that it might actually be taller, more massive, and even older than the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt. Now, when you look at this thing, it looks like it has 4 triangular sides, geometric looking slopes, a central apex, pretty pyramid-like if you ask me. And check this out. This hill has an almost perfect alignment to true north. If you thought the Great Pyramid in Egypt was accurate, well, the one in Bosnia is 20 times closer to accurate than that, at 0.0033 degrees versus the Great Pyramid's 0.05 degrees. I'm just asking, what are the odds of that happening in nature? Now, before you say, come on, man, it's just a hill covered in trees, consider that some of the most famous ancient sites in the world looked
That's pyramid.
like hills before they were excavated. In Mexico, we've got the Pyramid of Cholula, which is much shorter than Giza, but it's so massive at the base that it's often called the largest pyramid on Earth by volume alone. And before people even understood what Cholula was, it basically looked like a mountain with a church sitting on top of it. And there are plenty of other examples, similar sites like Teotihuacan or Chichen Itza in Mexico, Machu Picchu in Peru that looked like hills before they were excavated, or even all the buried pyramids in China that nobody wants to talk about. So why couldn't this be the case with the Bosnian pyramid? And what's been found there is super interesting. According to reports, there's these huge stone slabs arranged like an artificial outer casing which have been found, with flat surfaces, terrace-like structures, and massive blocks that look too organized to be natural, some of which looked like they were even made with some kind of geopolymer concrete. Researchers have also found strange EMF energy readings at the top of this thing, which sounds kind of familiar and shows up at other locations like this. They also found a several kilometer long network of tunnels under the site, which some think connect to similar pyramid-like structures across the valley in Visoko. And inside these tunnels, there are apparently megalithic blocks, seemingly carved by human hands. One of them looks like it has markings that could be ancient symbols or some kind of proto-writing or even a potential map. It's also said that they found artifacts like ceramics and large stone spheres that nobody can explain, which suggests that human activity had been going on at this site a long time ago. Now here's the wildest part. Organic material from the excavated layers where they were finding this stuff was carbon dated to over 30,000 years old, which, if true, has massive implications, and I don't think I need to explain why. Now, maybe it's just a hill and there's nothing to it, which is the view of skeptics and debunkers, of course, but what do you think's going on?
Allegedly, the mummified remains of a leprechaun was found somewhere near Karangafuka, which is like this creepy, haunted, abandoned, square, ruined remains of a castle. And this place is definitely creepy and already really known for paranormal activity.
Her lips.
But it's said that the remains were then sent to some horror movie prop person so that they could like add on to it, which makes me suspicious like about this in general. While I'm not fully convinced by that like mummified body, I do think it's really interesting that European Habitats Directive recognizes leprechauns as a protected species. So many people with so many different stories that I'm just like, they have to be seeing something at least. And a huge person that took place in preserving these was a guy by the name of Kevin Woods.
My job really is to make sure that they survive as a species.
He is known as the Leprechaun Whisperer. He believes that there are 236 still living leprechauns that live in the woods out in Ireland. They exist in like a spiritual plane. Only certain people that actually have access to them, kind of like ghosts and mediums.
There are millions of them, as you know, all over Ireland.
It's local to this place that allegedly has like verified leprechaun bones. This pub owner by the name of PJ O'Hare actually found them whenever he was out and about in the woods and he was hearing what sounded like a leprechaun. And now these bones are just like there for people to look at the pub, I guess. And now annually there's this leprechaun hunt where people will actually search for golden coins in the hills.
What do leprechauns sound like?
Probably a cluster of impacts around that time, so that the extinction wasn't one fell swoop. It may have been just like in a mixed martial arts fight. You know, somebody gets slugged, but they don't go down over a period of time. They wear out and they get knocked out. You know, they might not get knocked out in the first round, but they get knocked out in the fifth round.
So check me if I understand this correctly. The asteroid comes, it impacts, it sends up a massive amount of particulates into the air. The particulates then blot out the sun. The sun blots out the photosynthesis capacity for the plants. The plants die. The herbivores die. The carnivores who eat the herbivores die. And then thus goes the fate of the dinosaurs.
Right. Feedbacks. And that probably was an important component of the whole process.
The guy essentially found a completely legal loophole of Swiss property law that let him slowly acquire abandoned and ownerless land across the country for essentially free, roads included. Apparently, under Article 658 of the Swiss Civil Code, ownerless land can legally be claimed, not stolen, claimed. And apparently it worked, because over time, he claimed more and more land across Switzerland. Forests, roads, fields, industrial plots, random abandoned parcels, and eventually building what he calls now the Lawiner Empire. He does absolutely monetize this stuff because he says he charges maintenance fees for road usage. He sells construction rights near roads he owns, and he grants access permissions for new developments. He didn't forge documents. He just found some extremely weird loophole, and the dude just absolutely ran with it.
This is one of the strangest ranches in America that has 24/7 security, making sure absolutely nobody gets in.
You are trespassing. Please leave the area.
People have seen their cattle torn apart here.
They have cows, something like sort of
Oh my
strong and suck them up.
Seen strange creatures.
Suddenly they're seeing monsters
creatures that don't exist,
unexplainable lights in the sky,
You see lights coming from up there.
oh wow, it's moving really fast, and detected
demons,
high levels
man.
of radiation.
Radiation so bad that it spikes upwards like lethal levels.
The native
I made the full video on this entire thing on the YouTube channel. Check it out by clicking the title below.
Now, this is a bit of a crazy one. This is a woolly mammoth tusk said to be 10 to 20,000 years old. Look at the carvings on this thing. This was carved by Chinese craftsmen at the turn of the century. I mean, look at the detail on these dragons and the chain. And I know ivory's not a cool thing, but this is a mammoth, not an elephant. This was discovered, not poached. Incredible workmanship.
Wow.
Go back.
Impeccable. Those skills barely exist now.
Göbekli Tepe was a pub, and we might have created civilization just to get a steady flow of beer. Let me explain. Göbekli Tepe is the oldest temple ever found, built 12,000 years ago by hunter-gatherers who had no farming, writing, or permanent settlements. Scientists spent decades trying to figure out why and how nomadic people would construct something this massive. Then they found huge stone troughs carved into the floor with a dark residue inside. When tested, it came back as oxalate, a byproduct of fermented grain. And suddenly it all made sense. Göbekli Tepe was basically a pub used for massive feasts that included a lot of beer. A single one of these troughs could hold 40 liters of beer, which is like 10 gallons. And to keep these feasts going, they needed more grain than the wild could provide, so they started growing it themselves. Just like that, agriculture was born. Next thing you know, civilization, writing, metallurgy, all of it. All because some hunter-gatherers didn't want to run out of drinks. And honestly, I don't blame them. Just look at how happy this guy is. But ancient humans loved all kinds of drugs, including shrooms, weed as far back as the Ice Age, and even cocaine 8,000 years ago. Go check out my new video. My YouTube channel is Northo2. Go subscribe. I love you.
Of course, our oldest megalithic structure is a beer factory. Man, I love history.
Today's episode of Name That Epstein Associate, we have this man right here. So here's a snippet of the full picture that was found in the Epstein files. We can see this guy, identity unredacted, and this guy, identity unredacted, hanging out all in bathrobes with two redacted girls. We don't know the identities of these girls. We don't know how old they were. We just know that it's two girls and two guys in what looks to be a room, maybe a hotel room, all in bathrobes. So I don't know who this guy is, even though his facial hair would definitely lead one to believe that he'd be easily identifiable. I haven't seen anyone actually identify him online, but recently I did see an identification happen for this guy. Say hello to Dan Bashar. Hey, Dan. And let me tell you, Dan is not your average individual. Dan is currently based in the Blue and White State and is currently a research fellow at Technion Blue and White State Institute of Technology. So he is a tech researcher at a Blue and White State Institute. And here he is pictured in the Epstein files with what I think or believe are two victims / survivors. So there are a lot of connections between Epstein and the Blue and White State, along with many other states. I do want to state that. But this is just, once again, another data point in the web that connects Epstein to that foreign state. Not only through former prime ministers and individuals that were extremely high up involved with the government of the Blue and White State, but all the way down to people like this who are currently in that state, researching tech, doing all sorts of different things. If you don't believe that that state's government had any sort of involvement in the Epstein operation at all, I don't know what to tell you. It's blatantly obvious to anybody who actually takes 30 minutes to look into the Epstein story. And I would love personally to hear from this girl who is pictured here or this girl that's pictured there. I want to know what happened, what the context of this image is, why this picture was taken, where this picture was taken. And I'd like to hear what happened to them because it could be important testimony. Let me remind you that the FBI DOJ is not currently interviewing survivor witnesses in any capacity. They have allegedly spoken to a few individuals, but they're not actively working on an investigation. They're not actively working on a criminal case. I mean, for God's sake, the FBI and DOJ still to this day claim that Epstein didn't traffic a single person. They claim he was just a lone wolf creep who got exposed. But I feel like people in some of these images would definitely have stories, although horrific stories, to share. Not alleging this guy did anything legally. I'm just saying I would love to know exactly the context of this image now that we know who this guy is and who he works for and lives at.
but I'm going to keep plugging away at the Epstein thing every single day, so follow along for more updates.
Sickening.
After watching this video about cheetahs, you will never look at this strange animal the same way ever again. There is a lot to unpack here. For starters, did you know that cheetahs have been domesticated for thousands of years? They're widely considered one of the easiest cats to domesticate. Unlike a lion or a tiger, which many people have been eaten by after raising them from young, cheetahs are much more chill. So if you were crazy enough to have one on your countertop like this, you probably would survive. In fact, you may be more likely to be bit by certain breeds of dog. But really look at a cheetah for a second. Its head is that of a cat, but its body looks like that of a dog. Ooh. But what about its paws? This is a cheetah's paw, and you may notice, or not, cheetahs are the only cat that has non-retractable claws. If you grew up with dogs and cats, you know this paw looks like a dog paw, but this is a cheetah's paw.
That's right.
Compare that to a greyhound, the fastest dog species. Very similar. The other crazy thing about cheetahs versus dogs is that cheetahs are susceptible to diseases that only cats are, but they're also susceptible to diseases that only dogs are. That's a greyhound. There's a cheetah. The other crazy thing is that cheetahs are genetically identical to each other, which is a very rare anomaly to happen in nature. Almost like they're clones. I mean, think about it. You have dog species, and some dog species are a little bit bigger, some a little bit smaller. It doesn't matter on the breed. It might be, there's varying genetics. With cheetahs, they're like clones. Many people are wondering if this has anything to do with potentially ancient Anunnaki genetic tinkering.
Does everybody obviously remember that blue bird from the movie Rio? Because if you didn't know, it went fully extinct and now it is officially flying wild in Brazil again. Okay, so this is obviously one of the best stories I've covered in a while. The Sphinx macaw, which is the bright blue parrot from the movie Rio, went completely extinct in the wild. The last wild one that was seen was back in 2000. It was literally gone. The entire species only survived in captivity. And if you're somebody that's watched the movie, you know that the movie was literally about this exact thing. Blue was the last male and they needed to save the species. And it's sad because everybody knew that that's literally what happened in real life. Conservationists have now been breeding Sphinx macaws in captivity for decades, building up the population and preparing them for release. And now they have officially finally released them back into the wild in Brazil. We're talking about an entire species that was gone, 0 wild birds, and now there's a breeding population flying free in their original habitat. This is actually, sorry. They're saying that this is actually one of the most successful conservation efforts in history. They literally brought back an animal from extinction. I guess obviously the sad ending of Rio just got an official sequel, but this time it's real.
About 500 years ago, in the Kyushu region of Japan, there was a samurai named Isogai Heidajaemon
Man, I love her voice. Mesmerizing.
Taketsura. He'd been a fighter his whole life. Swordsmanship, spearmanship, battlefield after battlefield. But when the lord he served was defeated and killed, Isogai decided he was done. So he shaved his head, took the name Kairyo, and became a wandering monk. But the monk's robe didn't change who he was underneath it. He was still completely fearless. So one year, he's walking through the mountains of Kai province. He decides he will just sleep on the ground. Then someone shows up. A woodcutter, axe in hand, firewood on his back. He stops when he sees Kairyo just lying there in the grass. Sleeping alone out here? Who are you? You know, all kinds of things wander this area at night. You're not scared? Kairyo just smiles. I'm a wandering monk. But the woodcutter shakes his head. There are bad rumors about the stretch of road. My house isn't much, but it has a roof. Come sleep there. He seemed genuine. No strange vibe to it. So Kairyo said yes. They climbed together, rocks, tree roots, a narrow path up a slope until they came out onto a wide clearing at the top of the hill. And there was a small cottage with a light on inside. 4 people were sitting around the fire pit when they walked in. 2 men, 2 women. They all bowed politely when they saw Kairyo. The woodcutter sat down and spoke quietly. I live like this now. But I used to be known for my martial arts, got into drink, lost my judgment, killed a lot of people. And I've been in hiding ever since. Now I try to help travelers who get lost, and I try to make up for what I did. Kairyo nodded. I will recite sutras for you tonight. The woodcutter bowed deeply. They showed him to a small side room with a futon already laid out. Everyone went to sleep, but Kaido did not. He sat with a lamp and kept reading sutras into the night. Then he got thirsty. He remembered seeing a water trough out back. He got up quietly, slid open the paper door between his room and the next one over, and let the lamplight fall into the room. 5 people lying there, the woodcutter and the 4 others, all tucked in under their bedding. But something was off. He rubbed his eyes. He looked again, but still the same. No heads. 5 bodies lying side by side. Shoulders, neck, and then nothing. Just empty space where 5 heads should have been.
Remember the guy in China controlling flying swords with hand gestures that everyone was making videos about? He just built one big enough to ride. Fan Shichen unveiled a 4.6-meter flying sword weighing 100 kilograms that carries a human rider through the air, controlled by a sword-shaped lever with no CGI. Fan started in 2020 with sword-shaped quadcopters nobody took seriously. By 2024, he had a hovering platform big enough to stand on. By December 2025, he was controlling 30 drone swords at once through motion-sensing gloves, tracking every hand gesture in real time. The sword shape creates extreme balancing problems for any aerial vehicle, and his 4-man team spent 18 months solving it, with the result praised by Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning. Here's where it gets insane. Fan never commercialized any of this, never took a brand deal, built everything from his savings as an influencer. And his next goal, 10,000 swords moving as one. A scene from Chinese wuxia fiction that has never existed outside of CGI. Subscribe for more about technology.
Man, that's awesome. Imagine going to war with China and this is all you see.
A retired police officer saw and photographed what he believed was an alien on December 1st, 1987, while out on a hike.
Man, another grainy photo.
Taking photographs, Philip Spencer heard a humming sound and saw a small green creature around 4 feet tall. The creature moved away quickly, and when Spencer shouted, it turned and waved an arm dismissively at him, which is when Spencer managed to take this photograph. It moved faster than a human. He followed it and saw a huge silver saucer disappear into the clouds. He then realized that the humming sound he had heard was from the saucer.
This is what happens when you fight back against the system and the system bites back. A California nectarine farmer is going viral after being sued by Big Ag, who's locking him out of his contract, so he's giving away 125,000 pounds of fruit to local residents. Almost a decade ago, Cesar Mora was locked into a contract with a 100-year-old produce giant to grow their white nectarines in exchange for promised returns. Mora says that wasn't the case, and he ended up farming at a loss, so he walked away from the contract. The farmer alleges that the Big Ag company was rejecting over half his fruit because of minor blemishes, when industry average is just 15% rejection. But where it gets crazy is he alleges that he witnessed them taking that rejected fruit and selling it to somebody else. He never received payment or even a report of whether the fruit was disposed of or sold. And so despite all this, they sued him for breaching the contract, and now because of the lawsuit, other growers won't work with him to get in the middle of a dispute with one of America's largest produce giants. With nobody to sell to, he's giving away 125,000 pounds of nectarine to local residents and raising money in a GoFundMe for his lawyer fees. He's also countersuing them for deceptive business practices, saying they lied about having a patent to keep him locked in the contract. Everyone can go support him by visiting his newly created page, No Nectarines Wasted, where you can donate to his GoFundMe and get all the information about the free fruit. Cases like these are exactly why we created Localize, because the only productive future for the food system is abandoning this system altogether to support local fruit growers directly with no corporate middlemen.
Support the farmers, not the corporations.
Diddy may be in jail, but the Epstein class freak-off parties are still going strong. It's a big club and we ain't in it. Doesn't matter who it is, if it's a musician, an athlete, an actor, or a freaking porn star. They all serve the same master. The host of the party, Michael Rubin, or should I say Rubenstein, hanging out with Snoop Dogg and Martha Stewart. He's again with his 2 puppets, Jay-Z and Tom Brady. Fun to see here, just Alicia Keys making a very normal hand gesture. So that's how Lil Baby got his name. Michael Rubin was just whispering that in his ear all night. Let's not forget Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner. They gotta show up and support Michael Rubenstein, their Jewish brother. Hey, people's favorite rappers are nothing more than sellouts. We got DJ Calorie, Gay-Z, and Sloppy Joe. Even Donkey from Shrek and the Slender Man are paying homage to Michael Rubenstein. I wonder who runs the NBA. Oh. Of course they're gonna invite Palm Beach Pete just to troll us more.
Thanks for having me. This party's gonna be lit!
Remember, while most of us struggle to pay for basic things like food, water, shelter, the Epstein-class billionaires just continue to party. Let's wake up.
The issue is these demons in human flesh don't fear we the people enough.
Have you ever seen a dog so ancient it was worshipped over 3,000 years ago? Meet the Zoloid Skintley,
And then Anubis? I want
or
one.
Zolo for short, one of the oldest and rarest dog breeds on Earth. Originating in Mexico, this remarkable breed dates back to the ancient Aztec, Toltec, and Maya civilizations. Archaeologists have discovered Zolo statues and artifacts that are over 3,000 years old. The name Zoloitzcuintli comes from Xolotl, the Aztec god of lightning and death, and Itzcuintli, the Aztec word for dog. According to Aztec beliefs, Xolotl created these dogs to protect people and guide their souls safely through the underworld after death. But the Zolo wasn't just a spiritual companion. It was also a loyal guardian, watchdog, and hunting partner. One of its most unique features is its hairless body, caused by a natural genetic mutation. Because they have very little fur, their warm skin was often used by ancient people as a natural heating pad to soothe aches and pains. Despite their unusual appearance, Zolos are intelligent, calm, highly loyal, and known for forming strong bonds with their families. Today, this living relic is recognized as Mexico's national dog and remains one of the oldest purebred dogs still alive. A dog that protected homes, comforted people, and was believed to guide souls into the afterlife. The Zoloitzcuintli is a true legend. Would you own one of these ancient dogs? Follow
I own two.
For more amazing animal facts.
Mermaid bears are a concept I keep forgetting are a real thing. And that's not a joke. If grizzly bears had ocean sirens, they'd be this right here. Now, there's a lot of ways that can make you afraid of this thing. Like the fact that they're way bigger than you think. Like 12 feet, 1,200 pounds. I could mention what they do to penguins, sharks, other seals, one time a whale. Or I could tell you about the one time a person got murked by one. R.I.P. Kirsty, you did not deserve any of that. But instead, I'm gonna tell you a different story, because even after all these years, I still don't have answers. In 2006, photographer Paul Nicklin took a trip to Antarctica to find one of the most intimidating predators in the water. Which wasn't hard, because leopard seals are not like other predators. They're weird. Most predators are afraid of people. Bears avoid our voices, and a study showed that even the top predators in Africa hightail it whenever they hear human. And sharks barely acknowledge you, but a leopard seal will swim directly in your face and stare into your soul, and probably follow you around after. So when Paul found a seal, or I guess the seal found him, he ignored the pleas of his ancestors and got into the water with mammal mosasaur. Bless your heart, Paul, because a massive female sea leopard swam directly at him, and right when he was sure he was getting mauled, she just stopped and studied him. It's almost like Paul's lack of fear confused her, and the seal looked him over out of curiosity. She even studied her reflection in his camera. Then she swam away, and Paul thought it was over. Until she came back with a live penguin, which she let go in front of Paul. And when Paul obviously didn't accept, she got another penguin. Then another. For the next 4 days, every time Paul entered the water, the leopard seal would be right there to greet him and attempt to feed him. I think she low-key got frustrated because she started bringing increasingly lower HP penguins. At one point, he had 5 past tense penguins floating around his head. Actually high-key, because leopard seals often blow bubbles when they're mad, and when he didn't eat the penguin, she basically water-sighed at him. Can we appreciate just how weird that is? Like, the only other time I've heard of a wild, not a pet, I'm not talking about your cat, but a wild animal straight up trying to feed a person, it was orcas. Best guess is she thought he was a seal with a severe skill issue, but that's still wild. Imagine a polar bear pulling up with DoorDash. You love to see it, unless you're a penguin. The more you know.
Here you can see vegetables hanging in the air and fish swimming below. A single hectare can generate almost twice the income of a conventional farm, and it's one of the oldest agricultural systems in Asia. We're in the Mekong Delta in Vietnam. Farmers call it garden, pond, and pen, all on the same plot of land. Above, they build bamboo trellises that stretch across the pond. They plant gourds, loofahs, and melons along the edges, and train the vines until the fruits hang over the water. Below, in the pond, they raise carp, tilapia, and pangasius. And next to it, in the pen, they keep pigs and ducks whose manure also fertilizes the pond. The leaves and fruits that fall into the water feed the fish. The fish waste fertilizes the pond water, which farmers use to irrigate the crops by gravity. And the sludge that builds up at the bottom, rich in nutrients, is extracted every few years as natural fertilizer. Nothing is wasted. Variations exist in China, Bangladesh, and across Southeast Asia, but the Vietnamese version is the most refined. In the Chinese rice fish system, scientific studies measured 68% less pesticide and 24% less fertilizer than a conventional farm, without losing yield. And the most surprising part is that no modern engineer invented this. Farmers have been doing it for centuries, and the FAO documents it as one of the most efficient agroecological models in Asia. While industrial agriculture destroys soils with chemicals, a bamboo trellis over a pond produces more, pollutes less, and is more resilient to climate change. So if the solution has existed for centuries, why aren't we using it more?
South Korea drug usage is considered one of the worst things you could ever do. It's probably worse than essaying people, honestly. That's how they see it in the law, okay? Sully worked on a movie called Real. It's an action noir film. She had this scene where she's topless. First of all, who cares? Second of all, it's for a film. But the comments under articles about her new film, they read, she's already running around exposing her nipples. Not like this is a big deal to her anyway. She's pretty, I'll admit that. But her body's whatever, and her personality is just hopeless. But more than that, she had a scene in the movie where her character does drugs. They take it very seriously. Sully had zero experience with drugs. So in this attempt to figure out what it would look like, how she was supposed to act, she starts watching 5 movies a day where the main character does drugs. Her friends asked her, why are you doing that? And she said, I don't know what that looks like, so I just really want to do a good job on this. Because it makes sense considering she left FX to pursue acting. She has a lot of pressure. It's clear, like she needs to do well. But netizens thought she acted too well. They argued that only a real drug user would behave like that. From then on, the title of being a drug user starts following Sully, and everything she does is just further confirmation that she's a drug user. She talks a little bit slower compared to others. I don't even think that she talks slow. They say she's on drugs. They would take pictures of her pupils, compare them to other drug users, and it seems like she does naturally have bigger pupils because a lot of people were showing pictures of her where she's clearly not on drugs, like during interviews, and her pupils seem...
Is this girl from Blackpink?
Enlarged, like bigger than most people. But they're taking that as evidence that she's doing drugs and putting them side by side with drug users' pupils. It was a lot.
Explaining the iceberg of cursed animals. First up, we got the uncanny sloth. So this is a 1700s drawing of a 3-toed sloth. It was found in an album created by George Edwards. Apparently, this depiction was based off of a stuffed version from Honduras. And overall, you know, it's not terrible, but for some reason it just seems so uncanny and freaky and like somewhat lifeless. Maybe because it was depicted after something that was, you know, just stuffed. Next up, we got the horse elephant. So this drawing right here is from Tractatus de Herbis, created in 1440. It depicts an elephant that is way more horse-like than it should be, and also has really strange feet. But I'm sure you know that like a lot of medieval depictions and like medieval art style are created from these descriptions of animals only. And so, you know, these artists never saw these animals and they all came out looking extremely weird whenever they drew them. And for some reason, I kind of like whenever this happens, and I like looking back on it. Bat with too many hands. So this picture comes from a book called The Art of Falconry that was published back in 1241 by Frederick II, who was the Holy Roman Emperor for years. I'm not sure why this bat has so many hands, but I kind of think it's cool that they depicted it like this. It's kind of funny because this is also like a book about birds and stuff, and so I guess they wanted to throw in bats as well, and they probably hadn't had a really close look at them, and so they just assumed there was a bunch of hands on there. The Lion of Gripsholm Castle. So in 1771, King Frederick I of Sweden was gifted a lion from the Algerians. The lion died shortly after, and then years later it was given to a taxidermist. This taxidermist and the museum that it was located in had never actually seen a lion before, and so they didn't really know, you know, what it was supposed to look like back then. I'm sure that their references for how it looked was probably like pictures maybe kind of similar to this. As you know, they used to depict the lion with like a really flat looking face and looking like pretty kind of derpy looking, and so they just taxidermied it with a flat face and eyes that are like really close together and just a silly looking mouth. Like that is extremely cartoonish looking. Armored rhinoceros. So this is Drewer's rhinoceros. This is from a German artist who created this woodcut picture of this thing back in 1550. So he carved a picture out of wood, and this guy had never seen a rhinoceros before in real life, obviously. This depiction is kind of funny because it shows this rhino having these like really hard plates that are separate from each other that cover the rhino's body, and it kind of looks like sheets of armor. It even appears that there's like kind of like rivets that hold this armor together. But overall, for things like this, I feel like he did a pretty good job. Like it's pretty highly detailed, and rhinos kind of do look like they have armor to some extent. Monstrous chicken. So this this was...
Researchers just discovered the oldest known cave art created 67,000 years ago. It consists of these two little hand stencils that were found on the Indonesian island of Sulawesi. Its location is important because 67,000 years ago is quite a bit before we have evidence that our species was in the region. This means one of two things: that our species was in the region way before we thought, or that Denisovans were artists. And while researching for this, I found out about this 100,000-year-old engraved piece of bone from China. It was carved with geometric patterns and then covered in red ochre. It was almost certainly made by Denisovans and is arguably more complex than a hand stencil. Considering that we know for a fact that Neanderthals made art and had a complex culture, I for one wouldn't be surprised if we keep finding evidence that Denisovans were making art. Small discoveries like this are really just the tip of the iceberg because after all those thousands of years, evidence gets destroyed. But just like we see in contemporary indigenous cultures, life during this time was probably full of paint, pigment, and culture. The thing that I know for sure is this region is going to give way to some incredible discoveries in the near future.
And who knows what kind of crazy stone tools and artifacts and other stuff they might find.
Subscribe to my YouTube channel, Northo2, to learn more.
This cat is often referred to as Africa's least known, least studied, and least understood feline. Meet the highly elusive African golden cat, which is around twice the size of a domestic cat. African golden cats are the only known forest-dependent felines across the continent of Africa, and they are found in two different populations: in West Central Africa and along the west coast to the north. These felines can be found in all kinds of moist equatorial rainforest ranging from sea level to up to elevations of 3,600 meters. But it's assumed that they are predominantly terrestrial, as all confirmed sightings of these wildcats have been found on the ground. And it's mostly accepted that golden cats hunt using a stalk and rush technique. Their most popular prey species are rodents, but other small mammals, birds, and primates will also be eaten by them. Golden cats were originally believed to be crepuscular and nocturnal, so they only really hunted at night, but then camera traps in 2011 caught them being active and hunting at all times of the day. In fact, they found it wasn't the time of the day or the daylight that really affected their hunting schedule, but actually when leopards, if they coexisted with leopards, when they were the least active. And research also found that in areas where leopards have been driven to localized extinctions, these golden cats actually sought out bigger prey. As these cats are so highly elusive, we definitely still have a lot more to learn about them. In fact, researchers aren't even sure how many of them may be left because they're so rarely seen. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and follow me for more animal facts.
Wow, what a beautiful cat. Alright folks, thank you for staying till the end. Hope you like my lineup. Don't forget to subscribe, likes, hypes, and hit that bell notification so you won't miss my next video. Have an awesome day and always, God bless.